If God is all-loving and all-powerful, why is there so much suffering in the world? We see suffering everywhere, from natural disasters to war and disease. The scale of suffering seems incompatible with a benevolent God. Wouldn't any compassionate being use their power to alleviate suffering? This is the crux of the problem of evil. This contradiction undermines the foundation of a loving God. The God of the Bible demands our worship, our adoration, our unwavering devotion. Does an all-powerful God need our praise? And if he does, wouldn't that make him a narcissist? Would a benevolent being demand praise while allowing suffering? Is God's demand for worship a sign of narcissism or genuine concern for our well-being? This challenges the foundation of our relationship with the divine. The Bible emphasizes worshiping God. From the Ten Commandments to the Psalms, the message is clear: acknowledge my greatness. Now, on the surface, this might seem like a reasonable request from a creator to his creation. But let's shift our perspective for a moment. Imagine building a magnificent house and demanding it praise your brilliance. It seems a bit absurd, doesn't it? If God is truly complete, why the need for our worship? Does the creator of the universe derive satisfaction from the praise of his creation? This need for worship takes on a different dimension when we consider the concept of divine love. The Bible tells us that God is love, that his love for us is unconditional, boundless, and eternal. But if love is truly unconditional, why the need for praise and adoration? Shouldn't true love be given freely, without expectation or demand? This need for worship, coupled with the threat of punishment for non-compliance, suggests a love that is conditional, a love contingent on our obedience and subservience. Think about it. In our own relationships, wouldn't we find it strange if a loved one demanded constant praise and threatened punishment for any perceived slight? Wouldn't that raise red flags about the nature of their love, about their own insecurities and need for validation? Similarly, God's demand for worship, particularly when juxtaposed with the threat of eternal damnation, paints a picture of a deity driven more by ego than by genuine, selfless love. This line of reasoning challenges the very essence of our relationship with the divine. It suggests that our worship might not be a pure expression of love and devotion, but rather a calculated response to a divine ultimatum. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that our relationship with God might be based more on fear and obligation than on genuine love and adoration. Is this the hallmark of a secure and loving God? Or does it reveal a vulnerability, an insecurity that seems at odds with the concept of an all-powerful and self-sufficient deity? So, we've talked about the problem of suffering, the demand for worship, but this one really gets people fired up. The idea of eternal damnation, an infinite punishment for what are ultimately finite sins. Think about it. A life, even one that stretches for a century, is but a blink of an eye compared to the eternity being proposed. Now, proponents might argue that sinning against an infinite God demands an equally infinite punishment. But does it? Isn't there something inherently imbalanced about that equation? It's like swatting a fly with a supernova, a complete mismatch of scale. And let's not forget, this punishment isn't just reserved for acts of cruelty or depravity. It's also for the sin of non-belief. Imagine being condemned for eternity simply because you couldn't reconcile your intellect with certain tenets of faith. This brings us to a fundamental question. Is such a punishment truly just? Does it align with our innate sense of fairness and proportionality? Or does it paint a picture of a deity more concerned with retribution than rehabilitation? One of the most common attributes ascribed to the God of the Bible is mercy. He's often portrayed as compassionate, forgiving, a God of second chances. Yet the concept of eternal damnation seems to directly contradict this fundamental aspect of his nature. How can a truly merciful God condemn his creations to eternal suffering, especially for something as personal and nuanced as belief? It's like offering someone a sip of water and then throwing them into an ocean to drown. This apparent contradiction has puzzled theologians and philosophers for centuries. Some argue that God's mercy is only extended to those who accept him, while others believe that even non-believers are offered a chance for redemption after death. But the question remains, if God is truly all-powerful, why create a system where eternal damnation is even a possibility? Wouldn't a more compassionate approach be to guide all souls towards enlightenment, regardless of their earthly beliefs? We often think of morality as a fixed point, a set of universal truths that transcend time and culture. And in many religious traditions, God is viewed as the ultimate arbiter of this morality, the one who sets the standards for right and wrong. But when we examine the Bible closely, we find instances where God himself seems to operate outside the very moral framework he establishes for humanity. Take, for instance, the command to Abraham to sacrifice his son, Isaac. Now, murder is unequivocally condemned in the Ten Commandments, yet here we see God seemingly commanding the very act he forbids. Of course, the story ultimately pivots on Abraham's faith, with God intervening at the last moment, but the question lingers. Is it ever justifiable to suspend morality, even in the name of obedience to a higher power? And if God is bound by no such constraints, what does that say about the absoluteness of his moral code? The Bible is replete with stories of God meting out punishment for transgressions against his laws. Adultery, theft, idolatry, these are all met with swift and often severe consequences. And yet, there are instances where God himself appears to engage in actions that, were they carried out by humans, would be considered morally reprehensible. The story of Noah's Ark is a prime example. God, angered by the wickedness of humanity, decides to flood the entire earth, wiping out almost all life in a cataclysmic deluge. Now, even putting aside the logistical improbability of such an event, the sheer scale of destruction raises serious ethical questions. Is it ever justifiable to inflict mass suffering, even as a form of divine retribution? And if God is indeed all-knowing, wouldn't he have foreseen the need for such a drastic intervention, and perhaps chosen a more measured approach? These apparent double standards present a profound challenge to our understanding of God's moral compass. If he is not bound by the same principles he sets for us, how can we truly reconcile his actions with his purported love and justice? Now, we humans, we're a pretty emotionally complex species. We experience joy, sadness, anger, fear, and yes, even jealousy. But what about God? Is he susceptible to the same emotional fluctuations that we are? Well, if we take the Bible at its word, the answer might surprise you. Throughout the Old Testament, God is described as jealous, particularly when it comes to the worship of other deities. He demands unwavering devotion, exclusive allegiance, and reacts with fury when his followers stray from the path he has set forth. Now, this raises some intriguing questions. If God is indeed the supreme being, the creator of all that is, then why would he be threatened by the worship of other gods? Wouldn't that be akin to us feeling envious of ants building an anthill? Some argue that God's jealousy is simply a manifestation of his love for humanity, a desire to protect us from false idols and misguided beliefs. But others see it as a sign of insecurity, a need for constant validation that seems at odds with the image of an all-powerful, self-sufficient deity. Alongside jealousy, another emotion frequently attributed to God is wrath. From the plagues of Egypt to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the Bible is replete with examples of God's anger manifesting in catastrophic and often terrifying ways. Now, there's no denying that anger can be a powerful motivator, a force for change, and even justice. But when wielded by an omnipotent being, it raises some troubling questions. Is God's wrath always righteous, always proportionate to the offense? Or can it be arbitrary, even cruel? The story of Job, for instance, presents a particularly challenging case study. Job, a righteous man, is subjected to unimaginable suffering, not as punishment for any wrongdoing, but seemingly as a test of his faith. This begs the question, is it ever justifiable to inflict suffering even for a supposedly greater purpose? And if God is truly all-loving, how do we reconcile his compassion with his capacity for such destructive anger? These are just some of the questions we grapple with as we explore the complex and often contradictory nature of the God described in the Bible. From the cosmic perspective, the concept of free will is as perplexing as a black hole. We humans, clinging to this pale blue dot, like to believe we chart our own course among the stars. We make choices, we forge our destinies, right? But then enters predestination, the idea that our fates are preordained, written in the cosmic fabric since the dawn of time. If that's true, are we just puppets dancing to a cosmic symphony conducted billions of years ago? The Bible itself seems conflicted on this issue, like a star system with two gravitational centers pulling it in opposite directions. On one hand, we're told we have the freedom to choose between good and evil, between following the divine path or straying into the cosmic wilderness. But on the other hand, we encounter prophecies, visions of the future, and the assertion that God knows our every thought before it even flickers into existence. So, which is it? Are we truly masters of our own destiny, or are we merely passengers on a pre-programmed cosmic roller coaster? If our every action is preordained, what does that say about justice? Can a just God predetermine who sins and who is spared? Imagine a universe where a star is destined to go supernova. Would it be fair to punish those planets for a fate they had no control over? This is the cosmic dilemma of free will and predestination. Few stories in religious history are as cosmically perplexing as the story of Job. Imagine a man of unwavering faith, blessed with wealth and family. Then, in a cosmic blink, it's all ripped away. Job loses everything to test his loyalty to God. Talk about a cosmic curveball. Why would a loving God subject his servant to such torment? The story of Job raises profound questions about the nature of suffering and its role in the grand cosmic scheme. Is suffering a necessary evil, a cosmic crucible that forges stronger souls? Or is it evidence of a universe indifferent to our pain, where suffering is random and without purpose? If God uses suffering to test our faith, doesn't that raise ethical questions? Is it morally justifiable to inflict pain for a perceived greater good? The story of Job challenges us to confront the complexities of faith, suffering, and the divine. The Bible, for all its poetic verses and inspiring stories, also contains passages that are, shall we say, a bit disconcerting. I'm talking about the accounts of divinely ordained conquest, where God seemingly commands the Israelites to wipe out entire populations, leaving no survivors. These stories, often told with a matter-of-fact tone, paint a rather unsettling picture of a God who, at times, seems more interested in conquest than compassion. It's enough to make even the most devout believer question the nature of divine justice and the limits of obedience. Now, some argue that these accounts are allegorical, meant to convey a deeper spiritual truth rather than a literal historical event. But even if we interpret these stories metaphorically, the question remains, why would a loving God, a God who created all of humanity, command such widespread destruction, even in a symbolic sense? It's a question that has haunted theologians and philosophers for centuries, forcing us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that the divine might not always align with our human understanding of morality. The concept of genocide, the systematic extermination of an entire group of people, is abhorrent to us. It represents the darkest impulses of humanity, a stark reminder of our capacity for cruelty and barbarity. Yet here we are, faced with biblical accounts of divinely sanctioned genocide, where God seemingly commands the wholesale slaughter of entire populations. It's a moral paradox that's difficult to reconcile with our modern sensibilities. Can we, in good conscience, worship a God who orders such acts, even if those acts are confined to the pages of an ancient text? Some argue that God, as the ultimate authority, has the right to dispense life and death as he sees fit. But this raises further questions about the nature of justice and the limits of divine power. If God is truly all-loving, can he also be a God of genocide? These are not easy questions to grapple with, but they are questions that demand our attention. By confronting these uncomfortable truths, we can gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of faith, morality, and the nature of the divine itself. So we've talked about some pretty heavy stuff: genocide, wrath, testing humans with suffering. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about something a bit less intense, but still potentially problematic: favoritism. The Bible tells us God loves everyone, right? Universal love, embracing all of humanity. But then we stumble upon this concept of a chosen people. Now, in the cosmic scheme of things, singling out one group over others seems a bit, well, arbitrary, doesn't it? It's like looking at the vastness of the universe with its billions and billions of stars and galaxies and saying, you know what, that one star cluster over there, those are my favorites. It raises questions about fairness, about equal opportunity on the cosmic playing field. Is it truly universal love if some souls get a head start, a divine boost, while others are left to figure things out on their own? It's a question that has puzzled theologians and philosophers for centuries, and frankly, it's one that continues to spark debate and discussion even today. The crux of this favoritism argument lies in God's covenant with Abraham. This covenant, this agreement, essentially establishes the Israelites as God's chosen people, blessed with a special relationship with the divine. Now, proponents of this idea will point out that this chosenness comes with responsibilities. It's not all sunshine and divine favors. The Israelites are tasked with upholding God's laws, with being a beacon of righteousness in a world seemingly determined to wander off the path. They're like the cosmic demonstrators showing the rest of us how it's supposed to be done. But critics argue that this special status creates a kind of spiritual hierarchy, implying that some souls are simply closer to God than others based solely on their lineage. It raises questions about the very nature of God's love. Is it truly unconditional, universally available to all? Or is it, as this argument suggests, a bit more selective, a bit more exclusive? It's a tough question, my friends, one that forces us to confront our understanding of fairness, justice, and the very nature of divine love. One of the most complex and debated concepts in the history of religion is sacrificial atonement. Now, the basic idea here is that humanity, through its sinfulness, has created a sort of cosmic debt. Think of it as a universal library fine, but instead of overdue books, it's our collective transgressions. And this debt, this separation from God, is so vast, so profound, that it requires a sacrifice of unimaginable proportions to settle the score. Enter Jesus, the Son of God, who, according to Christian theology, willingly offers himself as that sacrifice. He takes on the sins of the world, endures unimaginable suffering and death on the cross to bridge the gap between humanity and the divine. It's a story of love, of sacrifice, of redemption, but it's also a story that raises some deeply unsettling questions. Now, I'm a science guy, right? I deal with the laws of physics, the principles of the natural world. And let me tell you, the natural world can be a brutal, unforgiving place. Survival of the fittest, predator versus prey, it's a constant struggle. But even in the face of all that natural violence, the idea of a loving God demanding the brutal sacrifice of his own son to atone for the sins of humanity just, well, it gives us pause. It seems to contradict the very notion of a merciful, compassionate deity. It paints a picture of a God who is more concerned with appeasing his own sense of justice than with demonstrating true forgiveness and compassion. Why, they ask, couldn't there be another way? Why resort to such a violent, bloody solution? These are questions that have echoed through the halls of theological debate for centuries, and they continue to challenge our understanding of God's love, justice, and the true meaning of sacrifice. What are your thoughts on all of this? Does it make sense to you? Be sure to let me know in the comments. So there you have it, folks. We've journeyed through controversial claims against the God of the Bible, explored accusations of tyranny, narcissism, and contradictions of love and mercy. My job is to encourage critical thinking and question assumptions. These arguments challenge us to reconcile beliefs with reality. In the vastness of existence, questions are often more valuable than answers. If you enjoyed today's video and want to learn more on this topic, make sure to check the description for a variety of books and other resources that we handpicked just for you. Also, don't forget to check out our other videos, as we have a large selection of videos just like this one available on our channel.
If you enjoy our content, we'd love your support. By joining one of our channel memberships, you help us continue creating videos like this one while gaining access to some amazing perks. As a member, You'll unlock exclusive content available only to supporters, earn loyalty badges to show off in comments and live chats, and enjoy priority responses to your comments, shoutouts, and more. The best part? Memberships start at just $2.99 a month, less than a cup of coffee. Even small contributions make a big difference for the PJ Bible TV team in covering production costs and delivering the content you love. And if you're not ready to become a channel member today but still want to support us, there are other ways to help. Engaging with our videos is a tremendous way to show your support. By taking just a few moments to like the video, share it with friends, family, or on social media, and leave a comment, you're telling the YouTube algorithm to share our content with more people. Your support, no matter how you choose to show it, means the world to us. Thank you for being part of the PJ Bible TV community.